Okay. It's nothing super intense, and some of it I'm pretty sure is actually in your bio.
Okay.
But this just gives me an opportunity to hear it from you. So Nat Geo reached out to you personally.
Yeah.
And is that based on like papers and books and things that you've been included in, or why do you think that was?
You know, there's a few different reasons for it. So one, I think, are because of I wrote an article for Yale E360 that talked about this subject. The other is I think that for better or worse, there aren't, like, I'm the Alaska historian at UAF. I'm not, I'm the only one in the history department who does Alaska history. The other thing is a colleague of mine, Finest Dunaway, had written an article in the Washington Post, and they reached out to him, and he referred them to me and said, if you want to know more about this subject, go talk to Phil. So I think it was a combination of those things.
Cool. And what originally sparked your interest in Alaska history?
The pipeline.
Yeah. What about it?
We were, I was a young grad student. I was walking in front of the White House, and there was a giant protest of 250 people who chained themselves to the fence. And it was about this thing I had never really heard of called the Keystone XL pipeline. So our nation has been embroiled in these pipeline fights for over a decade. And as a historian, I wondered, had we ever had an environmental battle over a pipeline before? Did it get built? And if so, what were the consequences? And that's what led me to Alaska and Alaskan history. And the Trans-Alaska Pipeline System was the nation's first environmental battle over a pipeline. And it was the most contentious infrastructure project in American history in the late 60s and early 70s. And then I spent a decade studying it and writing my dissertation on it, and that's what brought me up here. So I was actually living in Fairbanks before I got the job here.
Nice. I love that.
Yeah.
I also love the pipeline.
No, it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't know that about you. Where were you going to school in DC?
I was there to visit the National Archives.
Okay.
So I got my doctorate at Brandeis University in Boston.
Okay. Yeah. So moving up to Fairbanks, that's a big deal. So like you're working on your dissertation and you're like, I'm gonna go up there. Like, how did that work?
We actually, my wife and I first moved to Soldotna, and I did a bunch of that's where she got a job, and I did a bunch of my archival work in Alaska from Soldotna. So visited Fairbanks the first time in October, which is the worst. I thought this place was just a dump when I visited it in October because it's the worst time of year. But I did drive the Haul Road on that trip, and that made me fall in love with northern Alaska and the Brooks Range. And so it was a great adventure. We had a lot of fun. I like being outside, so I think it was a natural fit. And in some ways, I think it's, if you would have told me 10 years ago that I would be studying pipelines, I would have offered some type of 4-letter reaction to that. But it's been a really good fit.
So what are you continuing to study now? Is there a specific part of it that really interests you?
So I'm wrapping up my historical research on the pipeline with a book that I hope will come out right in time for the 50th anniversary of the pipeline. I'm doing this big climate scholars intensive this summer, taking students down to Valdez or Cordova and back to study the 50th anniversary of the approval of the pipeline, which happened in November 1973. And then I'm doing an article on the history of the Dalton Highway, which is, as you know, closely related. But then otherwise, my research is moving in the direction, I'm an energy and environmental historian, but my research is moving in the direction of the history of electricity and electrification, because that's where we're going with the energy transition.
Cool. So what was your experience like with our Nat Geo friends?
Yeah, it was, let me think about how to describe it. Well, they're, the main producer and the crew were really great. They were friendly. They were easy to work with. They were so curious about the subject. They were so eager and excited to be in Alaska. You could tell that they had a hard time narrowing what they were supposed to focus on, and they wanted to talk about so many other things. They were a crew who I think really wanted to come back here and focus on other stories, right? At the end of the day, it took a significant amount of time, but it was a very professional experience, and you could tell, it was wonderful to work with them because they were so dedicated to fact checking and accuracy and making sure that they were presenting the most accurate version of events. And it was also a pleasure to work with them because they showed me all the footage after it had been filmed and confirmed that what I was saying, accurately reflected my understanding of the topic, which, don't put this in the article, contrasted very sharply with when I did a Fox News documentary.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's really nice.
Yeah.
Most of the time they're like, all right, I got your things now, bye.
Yep. So very professional, very interested in the subject matter, and eager to return more and dig into other facets of this.
Cool. So maybe for like the student spin, as a professional or as students move into the professional world and may be approached for an interview, whether it be video or whatever, what is something advice that you might recommend to them when it comes to them feeling like they were fairly represented in that interview? What are steps they can take or ways they can work in that relationship that might help them foster that?
I think there's probably three things, right? So one is being upfront with them at the very beginning that you're happy to speak with them, but that you're going to need to review the footage or whatever they print to make sure that your research and your opinion is accurately reflected. And then working with whatever kind of public relations officers at your institution are available, because it's their job to help protect you and to help you work with the media. And then the third thing is just writing out your main points in a really pithy fashion, because that lends itself well to the medium, and you're more likely to have your clips aired if they are suitable to the content. But then B, you're really making sure that what you're saying is an accurate version of what you want to say, right?
I think those are really, really top quality tips. Like, especially being on either side of that, like in any topic that we're really studying, the breadth of what it's so big. Like, how do you include that? But when it comes to video or taking one quote that can embody something that someone said, if you think already with the forethought that this is going to be cut, how do I pre-cut that, essentially? How do I, shorten my own stuff? How do I present that in a way that I would feel good about it?
Sure.
I think that's really wise. That's a great strategy.
Good.
Yeah. There's what our Sunstar article is about.
Yeah. Maybe.
Part of it. Yeah. Cool. And so for this, what are you excited about for this documentary? Like, what's exciting about this documentary that you think people will enjoy?
I just think it's a really timely update on an extremely long-running controversial topic that Alaskans are very familiar with. But I think it's important to educate people nationally, because these are federal lands. These lease sales were mandated as part of a big piece of federal legislation, and climate change impacts on us.
And how do you think that what's happening in Alaska with the Trans-Alaska Pipeline is similar or dissimilar to other pipelines within the United States?
It's like a book right there.
I guess a better way to phrase it is, Let's say I don't live in Alaska. What can I take away from this that might be something important for me to think about when I look at my local pipeline?
I think a simple takeaway is that these pipelines, like other fossil fuel infrastructures, are marriages, and when we build them, we are committing ourselves to a certain kind of energy future, and we need to be really, really wise before we make these large capital investments, and consider what type of future they are going to create for us.
Beautiful. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I would just before you do the cornerstone blurb or any.
I'll run everything
Okay.
past you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotta follow my own advice.
Yeah. Well, no, especially with these types of things, it's like
Yeah.
the wrong words, and it's like.
Well, so
bad.
much of this is very particular, as you know.
Yeah,
But at least you
yeah.
come with a nice background in subject matter.
Yeah, absolutely.